and this big idea actually is what kicked off the lean startup movement, is that a startup is not a smaller version of a large company. This is a huge idea. Nowadays, it's kind of like, well, we kind of understand that, but when I was an entrepreneur, that was not the case. Our investors taught us to do everything a large company did. A large company wrote a business plan, we wrote a business plan. A large company did a 5-year forecast, they made us do a 5-year forecast. A large company hired sales, marketing, business development VPs on day one. They told us to do that. And more importantly, our investors assumed that all we needed to do was execute the business plan just like a large company. Yet they were surprised when 90-some-odd% of us would fail. And they blamed it on us as the entrepreneurs. The big idea that kicked off the lean startup movement was not only startups aren't smaller versions of large companies, is that large companies execute known business models. What's a business model? Who's my customer? How do I price the product? Who's my competitors? What's my distribution channel? How do I get, keep, and grow customers? In a large company, you're large because you know that. And therefore, you hire people to execute. But in a startup, the thing that you're all doing, you're actually searching for a business model. And that's the core distinction in the lean startup movement. We built tools for 100 years for execution, but we had no tools. We didn't even have a language to describe that what we're actually doing is searching for a business model. So one of the biggest both benefits and problems with being a founder of a company is a founder is driven by passion and faith. And in fact, on day one, a startup is closer to a religious organization than anything else. You're actually driven by your belief that you see something that no one else does. And in fact, that is not only the reason that you will succeed, that's also the reason why you will fail. Because very quickly, for a startup to succeed, you need to turn that faith into facts as rapidly as possible. The mistake is simply thinking that just because you believe, then therefore it exists. And the whole idea about the lean startup movement says, there are no facts inside your building. So why don't you get outside and try to get some facts as early as possible? And that was my contribution in this portion called customer development. And so the lean startup movement actually does 3 things. It says, let's take all your hypotheses. And by the way, I use this word hypotheses because at Stanford, where I teach, the students pay $50,000 a year and their parents want to know they're learning very big words. But outside of Stanford, the word hypotheses means guess. And if you really think about it, most of your startups are based around a series of untested guesses. Though you might believe, and you might have convinced other employees to join, and you might have convinced even investors to give you some money, the odds are most of what you have are a series of untested guesses. And what we're going to do is have you write down those guesses, and we're going to use something called the Business Model Canvas by someone named Alexander Osterwalder. I would have added Alex's book to your reading list. His book is called Business Model Generation. And in one single diagram, one piece of paper, we could put all your guesses. All your guesses. Who are the customers? What am I building for them? What's the distribution channel? How do I get, keep, and grow them? What are the profits and losses and costs, etc.? And then the second thing we're going to do is get out of the building physically and sometimes virtually and test those hypotheses by doing the third thing, Agile engineering and building minimum viable products. And so the lean startup consists of those 3 pieces: business model design to articulate or write down your hypotheses, customer development to get out and test them, and Agile engineering to physically build iterative and incremental versions of the product before you ever do what we used to call first customer ship. In the lean method, you're continually testing the product almost from day one. And it's not just code. It could be a PowerPoint slide, it could be wireframe, it could be just data to get some early customer feedback. Again, I want to emphasize, if you're doing the same thing you would have done in a large company, you are going to go out of business. Big idea. Don't believe that just because you think so, it's going to happen. If you're a technologist, then in Silicon Valley, our history is we started with products in search of customers. In fact, that's why I invented the customer development process, because every startup I ever did was semiconductors or supercomputers, or we had some great technology invention, and then they said, let's go find some business. Other people actually might come out of a space where they actually understood the customers and are looking for products that could serve them. In either case, the two most important things you're searching for as entrepreneurs, as the founding team, is this fit between product and customer. And this fit is called product market fit. You can't go further in your startup unless you have found product market fit. And product market fit is very simple. Are people grabbing the product out of your hands and saying, I want it, or I'm using it, or I'm buying it, or I've given you email addresses, or I'm downloading it, or some evidence that people actually like what your vision is? Every once in a while, I get a student who's taken my class, does a startup, and then I have coffee with them, and they say, Professor Blank, the customers aren't behaving as I think. And so sometimes I just kind of get exasperated and say, well, maybe we should ship a copy of your plan, with the product. And they write down ship copy of plan with product. And I go, no, that's not what you should be doing. You should be finding out why they're not behaving as you expect. And by the way, customers never behave as you expect. Never. What I'm really interested in, and so should you, is not how glib or how easy you could describe your company. I'm really interested in, what did you think? What did you find? Then what did you do? And then where are you now? I want to understand, where did you start from, and how much did you learn? These 30-second pitches just tell me that here's how smart you think you are right now. I'm really interested if you didn't learn anything in the last 6 months, I'm running away because I don't think you actually learned anything. I want to understand, well, here's what I thought when I started the company. Here's what happened when we shipped some minimum viable products. Here's what happened when the customers didn't work the way we thought they would, or pricing or competitors, etc. And so here's what we're doing. That journey is actually a lot more interesting because it teaches me the velocity and trajectory of the teams. Now, that scares some investors, but to be honest, I wouldn't want to take money from people who are interested in a fancy PowerPoint slide. I'd be interested in people who want to invest in somebody who learns rapidly and is able to actually match the market. This word MVP is overused, but very relevant. A minimum viable product is whatever you could build to learn the most at a certain point of time. And if you're an engineer, the immediate reaction is, oh, I get it. It's a defeatured version of the product. It's, some of the features are missing. And that just misses the point. That's not what an MVP is. An MVP on day one could be a PowerPoint slide of the UI. Or it could be a spreadsheet with the data you're going to provide a customer. Or it could be a wireframe. Or it could be even a conversation. An MVP changes over time, and what you're trying to do is maximize learning. It could simply be different price points. It could be A/B testing of pricing, which has nothing to do with the product. That is, what I'm trying to do is learn about customer segments, revenue model, customer acquisition, cost, volume, etc., correct channel, right partners. And so the minimum viable product is not a smaller version of the finished product. It might be, but almost often is not in the beginning of the company. And in fact, it's almost worth reminding people what a startup is. When I was an entrepreneur, I always thought a startup was the things I did, which is I woke up in the morning and figured out how I was going to take over the entire world, if not the entire universe. And that's what a startup was. But I realized that there were a variety of definitions. In Silicon Valley, a startup is the place where you get free food and get to bring your dog. But you're not allowed to bring your children. I never figured that one out. But so I came up with a definition which might be helpful. A startup is a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. It was designed to be like, you could say it in a sentence. So number one is, I used to love startups. I did 8 of them, mostly because I was unemployable in a large company. So I had to do startups. A startup is a temporary organization, which means the goal of a startup is not to become a startup. What's the goal of a startup?
To grow.
To become a large company. So I put the word temporary organization just to remind ourselves that the goal is not to stay as a startup. Designed to search. Boy, that's interesting. I thought the goal of a startup is to grow and sell stuff or get sold or whatever. Actually, the goal of a startup, that early phase, is to answer a bunch of questions about your business model. It's a big idea. The goal in the early days is not to hire people and execute like you think you're correct. In fact, the data says while you think you're a visionary, there's enough data across the world now to say you're not a visionary, you're hallucinating. Big idea. And so therefore, instead of wasting your time, we want you to search for a business model. Who are the customers? What's the right price? What's the right feature set? What's the right product market fit? And the way I want to do this is I want to get some evidence that this thing is the right business model, and I'll use MVPs to do that. But I'm looking for something that's repeatable. That is, I could do the same thing on Monday that works on Wednesday, that works next week, and scalable. That means for an input of, 100 lira, I might get 200 lira back. Or for an input of a certain amount of dollars, I'll acquire so many customers. And so that's what the definition means. A startup is a temporary organization designed to search for repeatable and scalable business model.